And when they did the workup, that's when they found the tumor. And then an MRI showed that it was a meningioma. So it required surgery, and it required surgery 3 weeks after we learned about it. And the prognosis was grim. It was told to me that, even if I get through the surgery, I'll probably walk out unlike myself. And the phone call they put into my husband, moments before the surgery began was, we don't see her coming out of this without major cognitive or physical defects. There have been plenty of times where we have reached scary points in our marriage where we feel like we don't understand each other, and it feels like that little the hourglass, has run out, and we
Oh,
feel like
yeah.
we've hit a dead end.
If you're struggling in your marriage or wondering if it's even salvageable, before you give up, let us come alongside you with a biblical vision for marriage. We bring a counselor's heart and a pastor's heart into the mix to equip you and encourage you for lifelong love.
Today's episode of The Vision Driven Marriage is brought to you by the Blessed Family Recovery Summit, happening October 24th through the 26th. Now, if you have ever felt overwhelmed by the challenges of addiction in your family, this summit is for you. It's more than just an event. It's an opportunity to find strength, hope, and healing in the midst of the chaos. Proverbs 13:12 tells us that hope deferred makes the heart sick, but a longing fulfilled is a tree of life. And if you're in a season of feeling like hope is slipping away, this summit is designed to show you that there's support and a path forward. You don't have to walk this journey alone. There will be 16 inspiring speakers who have walked similar paths. You'll also hear faith-based strategies for healing and practical tools to help you navigate your relationship with an addicted loved one. This summit is packed with resources to help you reclaim peace in your home. You'll learn how to guide your loved one without losing yourself in the process. So if you're ready for hope, healing, and practical steps forward, be sure to join us for the Blessed Family Recovery Summit, October 24th through the 26th. For more information, check the link in the show notes. You don't want to miss this.
Welcome to the Vision Driven Marriage Podcast. We're Doug and Leslie Davis, and we are so excited about the guest we have today.
Oh, it's wonderful. On this episode of The Vision Driven Marriage, we're delighted to welcome Latasha Kennedy. She is a dynamic entrepreneur with a rich background in both the arts and business. Latasha is an award-winning filmmaker, producer, actress, and business consultant. She's known for creating powerful content that uplifts young women and families. And today, Latasha is joining us to discuss love and laughter, building a strong marriage, where she'll share unique perspectives on how joy and creativity can strengthen relationships. We are excited to dive into this conversation with her. Welcome, Latasha.
Thank you so much for having me.
It's so good to have you with us today. One of the things that's been so exciting is we look at how God meets people in the place where they are, and
Yeah.
and He just brings them to the place that He intends for them to be. And so, before we get started
Yeah.
talking about how to build a strong marriage, would you tell our listeners a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, sure. So I'm a wife and a mom, and I've been married for 20 years at this time.
Praise the Lord.
Yeah, and so it's such a beautiful thing because just where I come from, that's not necessarily something that you would necessarily expect or anticipate. Because I was just raised by my mom and my grandmother, and I didn't have a lot of examples of healthy, thriving families and or rather marriages around me. But God saw fit for me to just position me throughout my childhood, especially in my teens, to be able to be mentored by, couples who really love the Lord and loved each other. And so it was just a vision that I just held on to and believed that could be, something that I could have as well. And it's just been like a really beautiful experience to grow and, grow in healing with someone and walk and journey with someone like my husband, and raise our children who are, equally exciting and beautiful to engage with. But yeah, I'm from DC. I was born and raised there. I went to school there. I had this profound vision to make my mama proud. And I just wanted to get out of Southeast DC and be able to do something extraordinary with my life. And so I worked really hard. I put my head down. My poor mother was, all over DC, driving me, picking me up in snowstorms. I was doing all the things. I was somewhat of like this beautiful, wonderful child, but I was also running my mother ragged. And I'm getting a little bit of get back with that even right now because my kids are very similar and just being super active and interested in trying different things. But yeah, I went to college and I studied theater. And at the particular school that I ended up at, you couldn't just be an actor. You couldn't just be anything. You had to learn the entire craft of theater and creating stories. And so at the time, I thought it was such a drag because I just wanted to do what I wanted to do. But by the time I graduated, I found that there was such value in understanding how to tell a story and all of the elements that made that story really pop and be something special for your audience. And then I got married and we decided, okay, here's a new chapter. And that chapter sort of just steamrolled from, being married a couple of years. My husband started medical school and then us starting our family. And just throughout the years, it's been a journey for me through, really understanding the seasons of life and the ways in which God wanted to use me in certain seasons. And so there's been some stop and go and some understanding that, in this particular season, my children need me more than the world does,
Right.
And so while I want to make an impact in the world, there's no greater impact than the one I can make in my own home.
Yeah.
And so it's just been a lot of that, a lot of, just praying for God's wisdom to really help me and give me insight about where I should be putting my hands to work. But God has been so good and has really helped me to, cultivate my craft and my voice, even with having my children and my children also growing in their own interest and intrigue about what is mommy up to? What is she doing? Right. And so it's been something that I've been able to do with them being a witness to in terms of watching mom, try different things and then also having, an exceptional amount of success in the things that I've been doing. And one of those things I'm most proud of is the film that I created and produced. And it was a story, it's called One Last Goodbye. And it's a story that explores the impact that suicide has on loved ones left behind.
Yeah.
And that story was inspired by me actually losing my mentor to suicide.
I'm
And
so
so even
sorry.
though I was very, devastated by that loss, I was also equally devastated by the fact that her husband was now having to sort of pick up the pieces and would likely lose his home. And, like financial issues were starting to, really pick up steam for him. And it was only so much the community could do. But at the same time, I just really felt like, wow, like these stories we don't hear often, you offer your condolences, you show up to pay your respects, you go to the repast, and then the phone calls just kind of start drying up.
I believe that your film did just that. If I remember right, that was an award-winning film. And
Yes, it was.
I had read that it has given a lot of people a lot of encouragement
And
and
hope.
hope. Yes.
But during that time, we found out that I had a large brain tumor.
Mm.
And so that brain tumor had caused me to have an episode at home where I was slurring my words and, my left hand had closed. And thankfully, it happened at home and while I was with my husband, and it sort of presented like a stroke. And so, because my husband was going to have to go to work the next day and I would be home with the children, and this was also during COVID, I didn't want to be home by myself, and that happened again. So I went to the hospital. My husband told me all the protocols to say and share, and when they did the workup, that's when they found the tumor. And then an MRI showed that it was a meningioma. So there's no knowledge of like what causes it or anything like that. But I had one that had been growing what they thought maybe even since I was a teenager. So it required surgery, and it required surgery 3 weeks after we learned about it. And the prognosis was grim. It was told to me that, even if I get through the surgery, I'll probably walk out unlike myself. And the phone call they put into my husband, moments before the surgery began was, we don't see her coming out of this without major cognitive or physical defects. So that surgery went on to be 12 hours.
Wow.
And I woke up 12 hours later asking what time it was. And they told me it was about 10 o'clock. And I was like, wow, that is such a long day for my family. Can I have my phone? And I wanted to just text my husband. I couldn't really see well. My left hand was a paw. So all I could text was hi, but I just wanted him to know that I was okay. And that was really my first thought was, oh my gosh, thank you, God. Like, I know where I am. I know who I am. I don't like where I am, but
Right.
but I was just so, so grateful. So 5 days later, I got out of the hospital, and my husband was just there to sort of just help me, recover and, get my strength back and, manage all of the appointments that I had at home to sort of help me recover. And within a year, I was considered to be fully recovered. Right. It was this incredible miracle where I got out and never had to go back in. I didn't have any complications. They were ready to wean me off the medication. But I myself had noticed that I just wasn't myself, in the sense of I wasn't really interested in the hustle. I didn't really want to go back to 12, 16-hour days. I really didn't know what I was supposed to do, right? And I hadn't realized that I had put so much of my identity in my work and in my title. And so when I didn't have that title and I can't, do all the things and accept all the phone calls and the offers, it was like, I'm just Latasha. So who's that? Right. And so it's this whole rediscovery of what's important to me and why am I doing what I'm doing, even though I thought those things were really dialed in when I was doing the work that I was doing. There was this whole other level of that God really used to sort of like peel the onion, if you will, and help me identify more of who I was in him. And in that journey, I didn't have much to do. So I was really using my time to use other skills. So I talk a lot about leveraging the gifts that we have, because so often, you have, there's anyone could have a job and they just put their head down, right? And my whole thing is, well, like, what are all the gifts that you've been given, right? Because you may not want to leave your industry, but there are so many ways to express how talented you are. And as opposed to being at the water cooler complaining about your boss not giving you PTO, let's talk about, some strategies about how we can maybe get you out of there, or add another income stream, to your financial portfolio. So I started having those conversations, even as I was leveraging my own skill set, which was web design. And I was doing websites quietly. No one in my network knew that I was doing them. But it was a skill that I had picked up over the years by starting so many programs and starting and doing films and needing a website. I had to teach myself how to do it. And so when everyone started moving off from their brick and mortars, I was there to sort of catch the fish, and help them get their brands online. And so I was doing it and I was like, guys, why don't you do it? Right. And so that was this process that was just sort of, conversations, if you will, that I was just having, but nothing was really going on too much with that. But there was a ton going on with my family, and my son was starting high school, but he was finally going back into the building, right? Because he had been hybrid for a year and a half, both of my boys. And when they did, I just realized like they need more, they need more to make them competitive. And I had ideas about how that could happen in schools that they may be able to go to. But my children were not at all interested. It completely fell apart when those opportunities arose for them to be able to do the family interviews and things of that nature. But as time went on, and especially my oldest child started connecting even deeper to his own faith and getting some goals and having some ideas about what he wanted his future to look like, he started to notice that, like, oh, I see what mommy's saying. Like, I do need to be challenged more. So, long story short, this whole journey was sort of a catalyst to us moving to South Florida. And we really wanted a place where our family could have like a real fit and feel like we were able to really offer our kids more in terms of education and being competitive, but also being able to explore their gifts from God as well, and be in a community that really loved on them and supported that. So this whole journey, though, it only happens because I have this amazing partner, right?
Mhm,
And
mhm.
because I have like this really cool zenned out guy, um, who doesn't, he's not too hot, he's not too cold, but he's just perfect for me. And he's really been like such a leader and such an incredible like man of God, in terms of really taking the moments to just pause and consider, what our family needs or what conversations we may need to have. And we sort of trade, he has a moment like that and sometimes I do. But I really think it's important to give husbands their due credit,
Absolutely.
because I don't think that we give our men enough appreciation, and I don't think we love on them publicly enough, genuinely, not just like, in a picture or something like that with a cute little caption, but really, but really, whether it be at home, whether it be, publicly in your community, to say, we owe credence to this amazing individual, this man who God has given me to, be the leader of our home, to be the father of my boys. And I find that that is one of the core ways in which we are able to really enjoy our relationship, which is just a mutual respect. He has a role, I have a role. He's really good at certain things, and I'm really good at the other things.
Yeah, we do
And
know.
we,
Yes,
yeah,
yeah, yeah,
yeah,
we do.
right.
It's the same with us too, very much so.
Yeah, and we've just learned how to lean on each other. And I remember one time my husband, he was upset because the trash was, needed to be taken out. He was tired, and the oldest son had forgotten to do it. And he was like, "Aren't you an independent woman? Like, because I don't touch trash, because I mean, it's three guys in here. Why would I do that?"
Right.
And and so I was like, I was so insulted. I was like, independent? No, I don't want that. Like, I'm good. Like, I'm interdependent, but I'm not out here trying to do stuff on my own. No, thank you. Like, I need you. I love you.
Go
I
take out the
honor you.
garbage.
Please. So,
Oh.
so yeah, so it's a lot of laughter, but I think that the laughter and the joy and even the jokes, off to the side or whatever, I think those are just because there's this deep level of friendship,
Mm.
Yeah.
of care. Even just yesterday, there was a cross in communication over the phone because my husband's traveling right now. He's tired, I'm tired. And I was like, I just want to go to the bathroom. I didn't really have to go, but I just needed a moment. And he called back like, I don't know, 12 minutes later. He was like, here I am. I'm back. Like, no, 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 not getting rid of me. So those are just
Oh,
those are just really cool moments where you realize you're with someone who cares and who's, committed and who's not so much moved by the randomness of any given day.
Right.
It's for us, it's really about the bigger picture and the vision and what we're really trying to model for our kids.
are you dealing with addiction in your family? Proverbs 13:12 says, "Hope deferred makes the heart sick, but a longing fulfilled is the tree of life." But when we place our hope in Christ alone, we find hope that never fails, a hope that anchors our souls as Hebrews 6:19 reminds us. This fall, join us for the Blessed Family Recovery Summit 2024, a free summit where we come together to find God in the midst of the struggle of addiction. Blessed Family Recovering Summit, Finding God Amidst Addiction, October 24th through the 26th. Join us at blessedfamilyrecoverysummit.com. So, what
Yeah.
are some of the things that you've done to build a strong marriage, to facilitate that friendship, over the years? You said you've been married almost 20 years or just at
20
20
years. We
years? Yeah.
celebrated 20 years this past
Yeah.
July.
And so,
Mhm.
so what are some of the things that you've done intentionally to facilitate that friendship and to build that strong marriage?
Yeah, so for us, it's always been about being honest, for
Mm,
one. Outside of, the fact that we really believe that the only reason our marriage has worked for 20 years is because we started with God and we've continued with God.
yeah. Yeah.
So that's part one. But outside of under that understanding, it's really been about just being very honest. There have been plenty of times where we have reached scary points in our marriage where we feel like we don't understand each other, and it feels like that little the hourglass, has run out and we
Oh,
feel like
yeah.
we've hit a dead end. And so that's when you actually have to do a lot of work to try to uncover like where did we miss each other and how did this disconnect happen?
Hmm.
But honestly, even in that, sometimes you realize that like there's just you feel like the Holy Spirit is really your guide in that
Yeah.
because I don't necessarily have 12 steps
Right.
to recovery, you
Yeah.
know?
Yeah.
I don't. Every time that something like that has happened, we look back and we're like, wow, like look what God did,
Yeah.
Right.
right? Whether it was a conversation, whether it was a discovery. I know there are times when, sometimes in your marriage, you assume that someone thinks something or someone feels a
Hmm.
certain way. And so
Mhm.
then you're responding to what you are assuming
Right.
Yeah.
as opposed to having that conversation. And so then when you discover that you're wrong and that that person never said that, never thought that, right? Then you're able to begin to build that bridge back
Yeah.
to, where it was before or even
Yeah.
better.
We've been there several
Oh,
times for sure.
so
Yeah.
many times.
Yeah.
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 Yeah, and
Many
I
times.
think that there's this myth that you never end up there just because you consider yourself to be happily married.
Mhm.
It's like, yeah, like we're two people walking down this road of healing together, and there are just going to be times when we bump into moments when we don't like each other. But I still didn't put mayonnaise on his sandwich. He hates mayonnaise.
Right. Right.
I've never poisoned them. I've never choked them and just left it there, you know?
Right.
So
And it's like what you said, you give God the like, look at what God has done. Like, look what
Right.
God
yes.
did. And I
Yeah.
think that, the Bible says that when we acknowledge the Lord, He'll direct our steps.
Yes.
And so
Yeah.
there might be times when you're going through you're going through the relationship things and it
Mm.
seems kind of haphazard.
Yeah.
Like you said, you get to the point where the hourglass sand has run out and it's like, okay, well, how
Yeah.
did we get to this point? But we're still giving God the glory for the
Right.
things that He's doing in our lives.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
He directs our paths even when it feels undone a little bit, you know?
Yeah, and it might sound, I don't even know if it sounds cliche or preachy, but I just really believe that it's important to get to always give your partner back to God.
Yes.
Yeah.
Oh, I think that's such an important part because there really are times when you're at an impasse and you feel like I really don't know what to say,
Right.
because if I say it this way, then it'll be interpreted like this,
Mhm.
and there have been so many times where it's just been like little things, little micro moments, and then there's just a stack of them, and then you find yourself back to a place where and you can't even remember why you were fussing,
Right.
or
Right.
upset in the first place,
Yep.
Right.
And then the other thing I would add is, praying together,
Mhm.
is so important. I also don't believe in weaponizing intimacy,
Right.
you
Yeah.
know. I think that especially for women, yes, for us, it's emotional and, and we want to be flirted with and, winked at all day long,
Yep.
you know,
Yep.
but it's also,
Cherished, right?
yeah. But I think that we do ourselves and our marriage a disservice when we weaponize intimacy,
Mhm.
just because right now we're sort of like not completely on the same page,
Mhm.
because that is like a part of a healthy marriage. And
Right.
if you're not, really communicating as much as you want, and then you also are not intimate, you don't have any, what is it? Time together,
Mhm.
whether it be date nights or just trying, like even if you sit there quietly, like be together, you
Right.
know, like the idea of I'm going to go to my corner and you go to your corner. I think there's a place for that. But I think when you're really committed to the friendship and the marriage, I think you have to just say, like, I'm gonna just sit here. I'm not gonna get up. I'm not gonna go to the other room, but I am gonna watch my show,
Mhm.
and I don't
Mhm.
want to talk. You know?
I won't be on my phone and you can sit beside me, but we're just gonna
Yeah,
watch the show
yeah.
or the ball game. In our case, like that happens a lot when the baseball's on. So yeah,
Yeah.
that's
So it's because you're living day in and day out with someone,
Right.
so it's not the highlight reel. It's really
Right.
about trying to, build this life with someone
Mhm.
every single day. And every single day, the question is, will you choose me? And
Right.
I
yes.
think the partner wants to know that the answer is yes. And
Mhm.
so the question is, well, even though, our wires crossed while you're on your way home from work, am I still going to give you dinner? Will I still offer a
Without
plate
mayonnaise, right?
without mayonnaise?
Without mayonnaise.
No mayo, promise. Without mayonnaise. Will, there be some peace at home?
Right.
Will have a posture of a willingness of reconciliation?
Mhm.
And so it's not about me. We've also really been committed to the idea of trying to outserve each other.
Yes.
Mhm.
And so it's not a matter of what keeping score
No.
and, well, I did this, so then you have to do that. It's our life.
Mhm.
This is
Mhm.
our family.
Right.
And when we model that, then it's easy also for that to permeate into our relationship with our children. So when we're talking to our kids about why we shouldn't have to tell you to vacuum, or we shouldn't have to tell you, to do certain things, that pick up your sock, why, things like that, because this is your home. We're a team,
Yeah, yeah.
um,
Yeah.
then it's not a do as I say, not as I do, because they
Right.
see daddy, make coffee for mommy. They see
Right.
mommy, go out of her way to, get up at night, it's
Right.
dark, and go get dad, an ice pack because his head's, killing him. Like the kids are watching us,
Yeah. All the time.
and
Yeah.
all the time. And I think it's very important for us to do everything and we can. We're not perfect, but
Mhm.
to try our very best to model the type of love that we believe God has for us.
Mm.
And then the type of love that we want our children to experience when they leave our home and decide to have their own partners.
Right.
So I'm very aware that my husband is modeling what good fatherhood and what being a good husband looks like for my boys. I'm
Mhm.
also very aware that my behavior and the way that I speak to my husband and the way I respond is an indication of what my boys will be looking for in
Yes.
a woman when
Yeah.
they're looking to get married as well. Not that they want to marry mommy,
No.
but that they have enough examples of good communication, of, laughter, even though it could have, remained tense,
Right.
Mhm.
things like that, so that they have real examples that they can hold on to and that can guide them.
Yeah.
And
And
even in those imperfect times,
yeah,
we have an opportunity to show the reconciliation that God calls
yes,
us to, so that
yes,
even in our imperfect times when things aren't going great, the kids will have the opportunity to see, hey, they reconciled that. Like,
yeah,
they turned that around and it worked
yes,
out. And
Well,
so,
yes,
you're right. They get to see what the blessings look like and they start to look for those blessings.
yeah.
It's not that
yeah,
they want somebody like mom, but they want somebody who treats people like mom treats people.
Yeah.
And so
yes,
that's the
yes.
blessing. And
That is the
Latasha, I
blessing.
love I love what you were sharing with the biblical example of outdoing one another and showing honor.
Yeah.
That's how Romans 10 puts it. And we're to
Yeah,
outdo one another and showing honor to one another, which is
yeah,
such a cool thing. But it also goes back to where we started the conversation. You were talking about how when you came out of surgery, went back home, and things started to change, and you moved, you'd
yeah,
come to the realization that even though you and your husband are both perfectly capable of doing absolutely anything,
right.
doesn't change the fact you still need each other. And I think
Mhm.
Yeah,
that's where people get confused. They think if I'm capable of doing it, why do I need anybody? But
yeah,
I loved how you shared we still need each other. And
yeah,
then just now you're giving examples of how you can kind of demonstrate we need each other. And it's not
yeah,
because you're not capable of doing it all yourself, you are, but we
right.
need each other
Yeah.
anyway.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, and it's such a beautiful thing too, because our kids get to see that as well,
Mhm.
us
Right.
working together. And we actually, we give ourselves a lot of credit. We're like, when it comes to being able to make something happen, God has really blessed us to be able to work together.
Right.
And for our kids to be able to, they directly benefit from that. So it's always such a beautiful thing. And then when we sort of get stuck and we don't really know what to do, my husband has been really good at finding the best books for us to read, sometimes together and sometimes as a family. And the one that he continues to read and reread is Seven Effective Habits of Healthy Families, and then Seven Habits of Effective, am I saying it right?
Highly effective
Yeah.
By
people. Yeah.
Yeah.
Stephen Covey.
Yeah.
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 I'll link that in the show notes.
We'll put that in the show
Okay.
notes too.
Yeah. Okay, great. Yay. But that one has been a really good one because there were times when, especially when our kids were younger, I think about my oldest primarily. And at that time, I was a little bit busier than I wanted to be. My husband was a little bit busier. And so we weren't quite passing trains, but we were just a very busy family.
Yeah.
And we didn't realize the impact that it was having on our oldest son. And so my mother-in-law had offered to watch our children like once a month so that Robert and I could go and just enjoy the weekend and not have to be parents.
Mhm.
Mhm.
And Elijah, my oldest, he hated it. And so when we would take him over there, he would cry and he was so upset. And we could never really understand why, because they had all the things, the
Mhm.
basketball, the
Right.
dog, the yard,
The
the
grandma, right?
all the grandma
The
stuff. And they
grandma.
don't put any restrictions, none. Stay up, eat candy, all the things
Yeah.
mommy says no. But we read in Stephen Covey's book about the difficulty of someone being able to share something that they don't fully believe they possess.
Mm.
And so we really leaned into that. And as parents, you're in your earning years and you're doing everything you can to, fulfill your own purpose, or in my husband's case, just to ensure that his family is taken care of. So, so with that, we actually dialed back a little bit, you know, took some stuff off of our calendar, made more time for Elijah and for us just as a family to just do silly stuff, play games, you know, run around the house with Nerf guns and, you know, shoot at each other. I mean, right? Just fun stuff. And then when we had a season of doing that, he was great with going over to his grandparents' house. And so there's no magic in it. It certainly meant that for my husband and I, there were some things that we wanted to do that we decided not to do because we wanted to lean more into our son. And that's sort of been our motto, which is, you know, whoever is demonstrating that they need the most attention, that's where we lean, that's where we lean. So if it's mommy who, you know, can't use her hand and is having a difficulty with different things, well, everyone is leaning into mommy, and it just changes. So we all get the spotlight. And at one point, and even especially when it comes to my children, that's something very important, especially with my youngest, who has to even go to the, you know, take out the trash and look like he's going to a gala, right? So he can never leave the house in anything less than something fabulous, right?
I love it.
So he has the most, he's the drippiest little 11-year-old I've ever. So for him, even for him, you know, it's a, you know, there was a moment not too long ago where I had to get our oldest son somewhere and we were running a little behind, but he was still picking out socks and the perfect shoes. And I was like, buddy, this day is not about you, you know? And he was like, okay, but I'm just trying to find the sock. And I'm like, it's over. Like, it's over. Like, this moment is about your brother. So you don't have to get out the car, you know, but he does. And so we're going to focus. Put the
Don't have to
focus.
match, right? The
Yeah.
socks don't have to match.
You're not even getting out the car, you know? So we're going to put the focus where it belongs. And I think it just helps to raise boys who are compassionate and thoughtful and not entitled and feel like,
Family orientated.
Well,
Yeah.
and think of others. Yeah.
yeah, and think of others. And every moment just isn't about you, you know? Yes, you're cute. And yes, we love you, but you have to share the spotlight, you know?
Right. And it sounds, you know, we had done an episode ago, several episodes ago, I guess now, on core values. We were talking about
Yes, yes.
how when a couple is really focused in on what their core values are, then
Mhm.
it creates an atmosphere where criticism cannot be evident, and it just, you know, it's really hard to be critical when you're focused in on your core values and you're not focused on your methods,
And they become shared values.
and they
Then you can
become
teach them
shared.
to your
Yes,
kids.
Yes,
Like,
and then you teach them to your
yes,
kids, and it really sounds like one of your core values is family,
yes.
and that's just really evident, and I think it's great. I think it's wonderful.
Yeah, no, it really has been. And even as we're looking to, and we're in the midst of different transitions with my husband and his job and his business and things of that nature. But the core focus is still our family.
Yeah.
And so, you know, it's interesting because sometimes, you know, I do realize from the outside looking in that people feel like you could be moving a lot faster. Like, why are you taking so long? You know?
Mhm.
But
There's
even
time
when
for that. There'll be a time for that.
there
You know,
is time,
when your boys
yeah,
are teenagers, they need the stability
they
that a solid
do.
marriage and a solid home that creates.
Yes, Leslie, that is so true. And it's interesting because when they're little, you're like, oh, they're little and they need me, you know?
Yeah.
But but when they're older, especially with my oldest son, who is incredibly, you know, principled and has a lot of moving parts, incredibly dynamic. There's I don't know if there's a day that our son doesn't sit in the living room and have some profound conversation with us
Love
about
it.
something on his mind and on his heart. And what's interesting is there was a season where we were getting home very late, around 10 o'clock most days, because both boys were playing basketball. And and so I don't know how the conversation came up, but I was the one driving them back and forth at that time. And I was saying how much I loved it, how much I really enjoy our car rides, our, chats, the silly conversations that we have. Some are incredibly nonsensical, some are, only make sense in our family,
Yeah.
And I told them that, that's actually one of my non-negotiables, which is I love picking my kids up from school
Mhm.
because I feel like I get to know them. Right? When they get in the car after that day that they've had, I have been able to be the one who has heard some of the most hurtful things that's happened to them
Mhm.
and some of the most wonderful things that have happened to them. And then nothing at all because they're hungry,
Yeah. See,
But
girls are
that,
just the opposite because when they're hungry,
yeah.
you're gonna hear about it.
Yeah, no, like they are asked, but my oldest, he just goes mute. He has like a full delay. But once he gets near the food, then all of a sudden his whole day
Like,
can
oh
like be
gosh.
shared.
I
It's
love it.
amazing. Yeah, but I think having those non-negotiables in marriage and, as a mother, those are the things that are like my guardrails.
Yeah.
And even though, you have to turn down this or that, I feel like you still get to have a ton of fun because you're very clear about what your values are, what your priorities are, and then as a result, what your non-negotiables are. So for me, it sounds silly, but when my kids get in the car, if I'm on the phone, I wrap that up.
Yeah.
Or I ask, can I call you when I get home with the kids and they're, doing their own thing? Because it's not just that the kids go wild when their parents are on the phone, but I've identified that as being a very sacred time for me
Yeah.
and my boys. And I don't want to share that, with someone else. So being able to be available to them and then also sharing that with them about how it matters to me, it was really special for them because that's not something that they knew. And so for my husband and I, we make it a point to look our kids in the face and tell them, we love you, we care about you. If no one else outside of this home validates you or affirms you, know that we will always be rooting for you,
Yeah.
and that most of all, God loves you. And that was something we had to constantly reiterate when they were younger. And we're sort of seeing the fruit of that now. When you hear teachers talk about their quiet confidence or them not feeling like they have to follow crowds and do what the other kids are doing, you feel like they have, some understanding about their identity, and they're not really looking to identify so much with others, but they are very clear about who they are and whose they are.
Which is gonna
Um,
serve them well in the future because they will be
yeah,
able to step out as leaders
yeah.
when it's time, knowing that they don't have to choose to follow the crowd, you know?
Yeah. So, I mean, I just think that when I think about marriage and family, I immediately think about legacy.
Mm.
I think about and I think about so much love, and I think about, like there's just so much intentionality that goes into our family, and there's so much thought, and like it could be one issue and we'll have several discussions, several long discussions, about the best next step to take, but God has been really faithful in sort of just positioning us to be and maybe it's also our sensitivity to the Spirit of God to feel like, what, I feel a shift is feels like it's time for us to think about our life differently or think about how we're approaching things with our kids differently or each other,
Yeah, I love
and
that.
and yeah, and so even now with my husband working more, he's usually really good at planning dates and things like that, but he's busy and he's doing a lot. And so as opposed to being a girl, which I could totally be, and be like, oh my gosh, like, why don't you plan a date? Right.
Mhm. Yep.
And, but he walks in the home with flowers and things like that.
Aw.
So I said, well, instead, why don't I just plan some dates? Like I know what he likes to do. I know different things that would really encourage him. So, like, why don't I plan those things as opposed to just waiting and then being mad or, feeling like he doesn't want to do it when honestly he loves to still go out.
Mhm.
But I think it's about meeting your partner where they are.
Yes.
And if
Yeah.
you're in a, if you're in a relationship, it really is like, it's the sharing, and it's the give and the take. And it's constantly like that. And
Mhm.
so as a wife, I'm always trying to think about how can I demonstrate or share that I appreciate him,
Yeah.
you know, because he's gonna get up and do whatever he feels is necessary to do for us, right? But I know that it can feel like a thankless job
Yeah.
because he calls himself the guy in the background, right? And so because of that, he's not always in the front, being able to do, all the things with the kids and stuff like that, even though he does have a lot of time to enjoy with us. But when he's, when he's at the hospital, he's at the hospital. So it's he doesn't have any flexibility, that's his day, right?
Mhm.
So it's been fun to hear, the day was awful. And so me and the kids go and we grab confetti and like throw it at him, like when he walks through the door,
Just make it better when you
or
get home. Yeah.
yeah, or just ways to be creative, to think about what would make them smile,
Yeah.
And so I think as wives, like that is something that the more we really lean into that, I find the more, the happier that my husband is when I'm just a girl, and I'm, easy to get along with. And even though I could put up a fight about it, I don't, right?
Yeah.
Unless I
Yeah.
need to.
Right.
Right.
Right. Unless all other communication channels fail.
Yes,
Right. No,
unless
just
you're,
kidding. No, just
yeah, yeah,
kidding.
yeah,
No, no,
yeah,
no.
yeah.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah, yeah.
Well, and I've been so blessed, Latasha,
Mhm.
that you've been
Oh,
sharing so much from your heart that I know that our listeners are going to be
Mhm.
encouraged by.
I
The
really
fact,
hope
the
so.
fact that a combination of being willing to share those words, but matching them with actions, both with
Yeah.
your boys and with your husband, what a blessing. And I would
Mm,
encourage, our listeners to realize that the words are good, let the actions match and
Yeah.
and to meet your spouse where they are. Things are going to change.
Yeah.
You
yes.
shared several of the changes, not only in your life, but in the life of the family as a whole, and the busyness
Mhm.
of your husband, and how meeting your spouse where they are instead of where you think they should be or where they have been
Yeah.
before
Mhm.
is something that can be such an encouragement. And above all of it, I love so much the fact that you are willing to see the joy and the laughter and
Yeah.
being able to meet your spouse with a joyful heart, with laughter when they need it. um, I get encouraged when God reminds me that every day I have an opportunity to love Leslie a little better than I did the day before. And it sounds
Mhm.
like that's kind of what God's leading you to, how you can just love your husband a little better than you have, and do
Yes.
something like throwing confetti at him when he
Yeah.
comes home
That's
is such a
great.
blessing.
Yeah, I think that's just great.
Yes, and I would just want to leave your listeners also with activity to do with their partner, and that is to create a mission statement.
Mm.
And that was something that Robert and I leaned into around 2018 or so. And that has been something that has sort of been our rock. Like we continue to come back to it. So, and then the other, the part about it is that, in life you have these dips and you want to ensure that you're not constant, your low point isn't the same every year, so you want to have some way to determine that like, uh-oh, like we're falling below, our breaking point or something
Mhm.
like, and so our mission statement also helps us do that.
Mhm.
And it helps us to come back to, oh, but I thought we said, right?
Yes,
Right.
yes,
You
yeah.
know,
It's a
and it,
compass.
Brings you back to those shared values,
Yep.
brings you back to
yes,
those
That's a
things
compass.
that even when you're disagreeing with each other, you agree on those things you value.
yes. And my husband is really the one who will pull out that mission statement and read it in its full entirety. But it helps us to remain accountable to each other and to, what we're trying to do here in our marriage and in our family.
Yeah,
So
I love that. What I have found is that the couples who can hone in on their core values, on their
yeah,
mission statements, they're more likely to maneuver those dips, like you were talking about.
yeah, yeah,
They're able to come out of those dips faster
Yeah.
and
yeah,
stronger than
yeah.
the couples who experience, because we all experience the dips, right? We all
We
experience
all
the low
experience it.
points, right? And
Yes,
so, but the couples that have a mission statement or have a focus on their core values, they're able to just
Yeah.
maneuver those so much better, so much
Absolutely.
easier.
Absolutely.
yeah, yeah.
Latasha, it
No,
has been a joy to have you with us
Yes.
today. We are
thank you
so
so much.
grateful for
Oh,
everything
thank
that you
you.
shared. And we're just excited that we know that there are people who are listening right now who are saying, I get it. I've been going through some of those
Yeah.
things, and I
Yeah,
know that you brought so much encouragement. Thank you for doing that.
So, Latasha,
absolutely. Thank
tell our
you.
listeners where they can find you.
Sure. So you can find me on Instagram at Latasha Kennedy, or you can follow my new brand called Girlfriends Thriving, also on Instagram. If you'd like to send me an email for us to chat more, or for any discovery about ways that I can be of value to you going forward, you can reach me at info@girlfriendsthriving.com.
Well, and I'll have all that either on the screen or in the show notes or both. And so,
Awesome.
oh,
Thank
Latasha, it's
you.
been wonderful. Thank you for joining us today.
Thank you so much for having me. It's been a joy.
Well, we have been truly blessed today as Latasha Kennedy has shared a little bit about love and laughter and building a strong marriage. We're Doug and Leslie Davis. This is the Vision Driven Marriage. And as always, we continue to pray that God will solidify your marriage.